out the window, and do they see things that fly by? Yes, they do, and they do talk about it, but they're reluctant to call them UFOs or UAPs. They basically, because there's a lot of debris up there. You got to realize the space station, there is a lot of debris around the space station all the time. And so if you see something going by, that could be debris. And so if you're constantly reporting that you're seeing things going by, pretty soon they're going to ignore you. So they tend to not talk about it. Also, looking down, they may see something fly by. That could be a military satellite. That's not something that they want to talk about, air to ground. They may come back later and talk it to their buddies. So there's a number of reasons why astronauts are going to be really, really reluctant. I think practically a UFO is going to have to come up there and knock on the hatch before they would ever talk about it or believe that that's what they were seeing.
That being said, though, there have been a number of astronauts since the Gemini program, and there have been recordings that have made their way out to the public about astronauts, and including rocket pilots, test pilots like the X-15 pilots, coming out and saying that they were followed, that they had craft around them. And yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, and I got to make it quick because we only have about 3.5 minutes until we go to break at the bottom of the hour, is with all of this information that is out there, I strongly believe that NASA is withholding a bunch of information that we probably should know about. And when Executive Director Bill Nelson came out a number of months ago and started saying, hey, I've been looking into this UFO stuff with the U.S. Navy pilots, and I've seen the videos, and I've talked to the pilots, this is pretty interesting. I've been raging in saying, have you checked your own closets? You know, the paperwork and the film are there.
Yeah. What you have to realize, though, is, again, NASA is a how-to organization. They're given a job, and then their job basically is to figure out how to do it. And so right now they've been given the job to go back to the moon. So they're figuring out how to go back to the moon. They don't really have the capability to be really investigating UFOs unless they see it with their Mark IV eyeballs out the porthole. That's DOD area, really. Department of Defense does. NASA depends on the Department of Defense.
Meet Extended Stay America Select Suites, a new place like home with spacious apartment-style suites and full kitchens. With Extended Stay America Select Suites, you get real, simple value. The longer you stay, the more you save. Learn more at ESA.com.
This episode is sponsored by the audiobook edition of The Choice, the third and final installment in the Dragon Heart Legacy series by best-selling author Nora Roberts, read by narrator Barry Krynick. In the conclusion of this epic trilogy, Breen must confront the darkness with her sword, her magics, and her courage. Start listening to The Choice by Nora Roberts now.
Tells them what debris is in orbit. NASA doesn't have that capability. That's all DOD. So it's very, very possible that DOD is holding back information. I absolutely 100% suspect that they are. NASA, not so much.
So wouldn't somebody in Bill Nelson's position be in the know of what is going on, considering he has friends? I mean, he's a former astronaut himself from the shuttle program, and that he has friends, you know, all throughout NASA who've gone up in space and seen things?
Well, again, you're seeing things, but you don't necessarily know what you're seeing. You're more likely to make a discernment on what you're seeing electronically, through radar or through other electronic means. The Mark IV eyeballs, that's what the astronauts have to see. They're seeing the same things that people who see UFOs from the ground see, except they're seeing it from a unique perspective. So, I don't even think the President of the United States has the full information. I don't know that they necessarily ask. I can remember, I'm old enough to remember that Jimmy Carter was going to get to the bottom of the UFOs. And he was just completely blocked off from, he never got the information he asked for. It never came. And I think Bill Clinton also, I know Al Gore was looking into it, never got a satisfactory answer from the people that should know. They would simply say, well, we're studying it. We're going to get you a paper. That paper may or may not ever arrive. The president gets interested in other things. There are a lot of ways that the bureaucracy can keep you from learning something that they're not totally sure about it themselves. Maybe they think it's a bad career move to let their superiors know what they think they know and maybe don't know. So I think that's a big part of it.
Well, I strongly believe that, and I just cannot be convinced otherwise, that there is, I don't believe the scientists know. Okay, they have a job to do. They got to get people into space and back home safely. And I think I couldn't imagine the stress of that job. I really couldn't. But I do think that there is some sort of backdoor area where somewhere in Huntsville or in Florida or in Houston, there is a room that has some UFO stuff in there. I'm guaranteeing it.
Well, I can tell you that I know a couple of retired NASA engineers who worked on Apollo, and they wonder about this too, and they have a lot of information. We can talk about that later.
Let's talk about it later. The legendary Homer Hickam is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Are we going back to the moon? What will that be like when we return on Spaced Out Radio? I guess my big thing about it, Homer, is when Bill Nelson came out and said, "Hey, in his accent, we got to go looking into this UFO stuff." I just, as someone who has experienced the phenomena on a close and personal level, I just really felt insulted and let down. And I'm not saying that he's in the know, but he's in the position to know.
Dave, I don't think he is in a position to know, quite frankly. The NASA administrator is way low on the totem pole in the federal government. I mean, NASA has 1 million pounds of what we call soft power. People, they look at that NASA worm, they look at that NASA meatball, and they're just totally impressed by what NASA has done. But again, that's what NASA does. It does things. It does what it's told to do. It doesn't have a very big budget. It has to depend a lot on the Department of Defense. So if there are answers on the UFO, you're probably not going to find it within NASA. NASA is a engineering program, mostly. It's an engineering program that enables science, but 99% of the people who work on these things are just totally focused on the engineering, and they're not really interested in peeling an onion back. There's no mission that goes out and looks at UFOs, but the DOD is constantly looking at what's out there.
Right.
That's where the answer is. If there is an answer, DOD's got it, not NASA, in my opinion.
I'm going to put you in the green room here for just a moment. I'm just going to go upstairs, check on my son. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay, great.
Be right back, everyone. Homer Hickam, our guest. Give me 2 seconds, guys. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate earning your listening ears. I want to remind you that if you miss portions of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Legendary rocket boy Homer Hickam is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. And right before the break, we were talking about NASA, aliens. What do they know? What do they not know? But we're going to turn the tides to going back to the moon, because that seems to be the goal within the next 5 years of the space program. And I know, Homer, you are very excited about going back to the moon and getting people on the moon, maybe even establishing some sort of moon base or something like that. Why is this important to humanity?
Well, before we do that, let's go back and talk about UFOs just for a minute more. I think, Dave, that my answer disappoints you somewhat, and I'm sorry about that. But I would ask you again. We've talking during the break that NASA is a very engineering-oriented organization. They're given a test like going back to the moon, so 99% of the engineers are just totally focused on building whatever it takes to go back and do that. However, NASA does have the Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble has been looking out across our solar system since 1992, every day, tens of thousands of photographs of our solar system on out to the edge of the solar system and beyond, the galaxies beyond. It has uncovered billions of galaxies that we didn't even know existed. And now we've got the web, and we do that as well. So NASA is looking out all the time. So you can't really ask them to do much more than what they do. And then engineering-wise, they're building the space station or they're building rockets or whatever they're doing. So, however, with the Hubble during all this time, as unique as the Hubble is, as capable as the Hubble is, it has not seen, and I would have heard this because I know the Hubble guys that up at Goddard that work all this, they haven't seen anything coming in, anything big. And we also have just tens of thousands of astronomers around the world that constantly are looking out, and we know we can pick out the tiniest asteroids that are maybe only a couple of hundred yards across. We know where they are. So with all of us looking out across the solar system, why aren't we seeing these spacecraft coming in if, in fact, they are coming in? So that leads me to the conclusion they're not coming in. They're already here. And so all of our stuff looking out is missing what, and again, this is just my theory, they're already here. And so we're not going to see the big convoy or big spacecraft coming in. So maybe I'm sorry that I disappoint you with my NASA answer, but that's the way that I see it. And NASA is not looking for what's already here.
Well,
they're looking for what's out there. Okay?
I would counter that, if you don't mind, please.
No?
I would counter that by saying that as many people who are using these to try these satellites like Hubble or James Webb or the SETI program that 40 plus years found nothing, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people who have experienced things on their own or seen things on their own.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And that's kind of my point, is that you kind of expect, well, the astronauts, why aren't they seeing UFOs? Well, they have a unique position, above us, but we also do. We fly in airplanes every day, and we look up every day. So yes, I'm not going to argue at all that that there's something there. There's definitely something there. It's very strange. It's unexplained. We don't know what it is, but it doesn't necessarily take, you don't want to necessarily depend on NASA to tell you what it is, because I don't think NASA knows. Again, that's not NASA's job to know. There are folks probably in the bowels of the Pentagon that know an awful lot about this, and they have their reasons for not giving out that information, whatever it is. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating to me too. I'd like to know, but I do take some comfort in not knowing everything, you know. I like the fact that there are mysteries still in this world. And again, that's why I love your audience. Your audience is intrigued by all this. They want to know, but at the same time, they realize that there are always going to be just unexplained things in this world and in this universe that we live in. That's what really kind of makes it interesting. So that's my take on it, and so I think we're in raging agreement about this in a way.
Please pardon my ignorance on this question, because I don't quite understand what you mean by this. You say it's not NASA's job to know. Now, for many of us who don't understand how the layer of bricks work when it comes to space, we look at NASA as the be-all and end-all gods of what is above us. So it kind of baffles me a little bit when you say that NASA may not know or doesn't have a right to know what's going on.
Right. Well, now NASA is given the task, for instance, to put robotic rovers on Mars. That's the task that they get, and they do it superbly. The Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, they're in charge of most of that. And we have these rovers that, we have robots on Mars, and they're looking around. So NASA is tasked to do that, but NASA may not actually be the one that's receiving all of the information and also making discernments on what they are seeing. Those experts are not necessarily within NASA. The engineers are there, some of the scientists are there, but a lot of that's going out to universities. And who are experts, these professors, that's their entire career, is trying to understand Mars, and the geologists get involved. So a lot of that, NASA is like, okay, we're going on to the next thing. We're going to build the next rover, and we're going to go to Venus, or we're going to go wherever we're going to go. We're going back to the moon. So NASA is can-do, how-do organization that is given the task to put these eyes on the solar system and these planets and our moons, but they aren't necessarily the one within NASA that studies that and comes up with certain conclusions. If you get my drift here, NASA essentially is an engineering organization.
Right. Well, if you knew how my brain works, I'm sitting here saying that Homer Hickam is telling me that there's a secret space program out there that we should be paying attention to.
There may very well be, and it's not NASA's. It's going to belong to the Department of Defense, and obviously there is a secret space program out there. There's the X-37. It just landed last week. That's been up there for a couple of years, and we have no clue. I can guarantee you, nobody in NASA, including Bill Nelson, has a clue as to what the X-37 was up to while it was up there, because that's not their business. DOD would slap NASA down so fast if they tried to figure that out. It's just like, no, it's none of your business what we're doing up here, buddy. Leave us alone. So again, I'm sorry that my answer and NASA disappoints you a little bit. But you do have to kind of know the bureaucracy of NASA. And I was part of that. I used to call myself a bureaucratic infighter because we have these different centers, Marshall Space Flight Center here in Huntsville, Johnson down in Houston, Goddard up in Maryland. And we're always jockeying for funding, and it's because we have the best engineers, or we propose to do this, we propose to do that. And that's the way bureaucracies work. So NASA has certain parameters, if you will, restrictions that it stays within. It very, very rarely gets involved with anything that has to do with defense. Sometimes when the shuttle was flying, it had a couple of defense-oriented missions, and the astronauts never talked about that. But, we know what they were doing. They were launching spy satellites, no question about it. So that's what NASA does. That's its business. That's how it makes a living, is engineering. And but there are elements to the Department of Defense that are looking at these things, and whatever they are, and they have the instrumentation, they have the equipment, if anybody does, to figure out what they are.
Okay, so considering you're more nuts and bolts than I will ever be, I got to ask you about the moon here, because there are all these rumors that many Apollo astronauts actually had some sort of happening on the moon while they were, investigating things. And I do believe that, there's reports, of Neil Armstrong saying they're on the hill watching us. Yes, there is a Santa Claus. I know Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the number 6 man to walk on the moon, was a big proponent of UFOs and extraterrestrials from what he had seen allegedly on Apollo. I got to ask you, because as silly as this will sound, and I already know what your answer is, and I'm just shaking my head that I'm going to embarrass myself and ask this. There's always been rumors that we weren't allowed to go back to the moon. Okay, and I realize this is real sci-fi stuff here, Homer. But, I mean, is there anything out there that would perceive that maybe we were asked not to go back to the moon, or that we just shut it down for no reason? We didn't shut it down for no reason. I mean, we shut it down for political reasons and budget reasons and congressional reasons and a lot of really, in my opinion, stupid reasons. I wish it had been that we saw something on the moon that we couldn't go back to, but I know I've met most of the Apollo astronauts. They've never told me that story. Just real quick, why did we stop going to the moon? Apollo 13 scared NASA to death, and they were not.
Meet Extended Stay America Select Suites, a new place like home with spacious apartment-style suites and full kitchens. With Extended Stay America Select Suites, you get real, simple value. The longer you stay, the more you save. Learn more at ESA.com.
You go by many titles. Dad,
It's time to get out.
No.
night manager, and pool captain.
Hey guys, let's go. Come on. Everybody in.
So adding a student title might feel daunting. But what if a school could be there for all of you? Career, family, finances, and mental health. National University believes supporting all your titles can lead to another one. Successful graduate. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.
Not going to get the funding to make the Apollo program better. They were still going to have to fly on the Saturn V with the Apollo capsule and that flimsy little limb, and they knew they were going to lose astronauts. So when Congress started kicking up a fuss, this has costed us too much money, you got to realize we didn't know what the moon was like. We brought all those rocks back, but nobody had had time to study them at that point. So as far as we knew, the moon was just a dead, dry, awful place, not worth visiting, just a bunch of rocks we dragged back. It's not worth losing people over. It's not worth spending all this money. And you got to realize also, Dave, that I know an awful lot of the engineers here in Huntsville that worked on that program. They were worn out. They were absolutely exhausted to get us to the moon within the decade of the 1960s in order to meet JFK's what his requirement was. And so they were exhausted. They were ready to step away from it. Most of them retired. They retired in their 20s and their 30s just to get away from working these 16, 18, 20-hour days. They had lost their families. A lot of them had died of heart attack because they smoked and they drank too much while trying to make that happen. So there are a lot of really valid reasons. Now, I didn't like that, as I mentioned before. Of course, the shuttle program was a great program. It did a lot of really, really terrific things, but I always felt like that we should go back to the moon. And the first chance that at least Vice President Pence and the National Space Council could do it after we'd built the space station and after obviously the shuttle needed to be retired, that was our next thing, is to go back to the moon. So if there's anything in the hallways of the Pentagon or NASA or the White House or anywhere else that says, oh, there's something there that we can't go back to, nobody now knows about it. And if there is, we're about to find out, because we are going back. Now, so as I mentioned at the top of the program, what I want NASA to do is not just to figure out how to go back to the moon. That's what they're doing right now, is figuring out how, but also to figure out why they're going back. And I'm not exactly sure that they know why they're going back. And the reason that, to me, the reason is, and NASA is always very reluctant to talk about it. If you talk about, well, NASA, why do you have the International Space Station? Why did you have the shuttle program? Why did, they always say, well, it's because of science. We're doing it for science, and we're doing it for inspiration. That's it. We're going to inspire our youth. And it's like, you want to inspire our youth? Just tell them to watch the movie October Sky. There's your inspiration. You don't need to go back to the moon.
Bingo.
So the reason that we're going back, because we're going back to live there. We're going to go live on the moon. We're going to go work on the moon. There are resources on the moon. That's why we're going back. Forget science and inspiration. Science, yes. Inspiration, great, fine. But we're going back. We're going to build communities just like where I grew up in Coalwood, West by God, Virginia. We're going to build mining towns on the moon, and we're going to bring all those resources back to the earth. And if we find something out there, I hope that we do, that falls into the area that you're talking about, all the better. But we are going back, and if there's something there, we are going to find it.
Homer Hickam is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We got about 7 minutes to go before we got to go to break at the top of the hour. Homer, I don't know if this would be true or not, but I'm going to ask the question. Is there a contingency plan within NASA that, let's say we go back onto the moon and there are extraterrestrial craft there, or there are extraterrestrials walking along the moon? Is there contingency plans within NASA to deal with such situations?
I really doubt it. Again, what NASA will do for their astronauts is, okay, I mean, I don't know if you know, I'll give you some details. The whole idea, the way that we're going to land on the moon is actually using Elon's SpaceX Starship. We're going to fly out to, maybe we'll have something out there called the Gateway, maybe not. We're going to go out on SLS in the Orion spacecraft. So we're going to train the astronauts how to fly this thing. This is going to be a rough machine to fly on. The SLS is just going to shake the bejesus out of these crew members. So we're really going to have to train them to be able to. I don't know if you've seen Top Gun Maverick, where they're just going through all these gyrations. These astronauts are going to get shaken up really, really bad. So we're going to have to train them well to take this rough ride. Once they get on the way to the moon, it'll all smooth out and everything will be okay. But once they're up there, they're supposed to, meanwhile, we're going to fly the Starship up, and the Starship will get refueled, and then it's going to go on up, and the Orion is going to, believe me, I think this is kind of a Rube Goldberg plan, but this is NASA's plan. So the astronauts are going to transfer from the Orion into the Starship, and then the Starship, this huge vehicle, I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it's just massive. It's going to land, and then the astronauts are going to have to get out and basically have an elevator that winches them down to the moon. So believe me, to train the astronauts to accomplish what they are going to do, that total focus is going to be how to make all of this work and just to sit yourself down on the moon and still be alive. So that's going to be our focus. Now, if they do see something, I don't think there's going to be a thing in the world. I mean, we're talking about the astronauts of today they grew up in the 2000s. Believe me, nobody's going to shut them up. If they see something, they're going to report it. So that's going to be exciting right there. But there's just exciting things to see and do on the moon. So really looking forward to it.
I would assume that there would be some sort of plan. You know, the United States government does nothing without a contingency plan on something. That's just the way I look at this.
There's a lot of contingency plans for failure, needless to say, and redundancy and so on. But and you know, most of the astronauts, they're extremely motivated young people. They're extremely bright. They are all totally aware of UFOs and all of the sightings. So believe me, you don't have to. If I was going to train one, I wouldn't suppose that they don't know anything about it. I would start from the standpoint that they know an awful lot about it, because they're people who are very interested in things, and I would imagine there are a number of astronauts that are part of your audience. They're intrigued by this and they want to know more. And so, in terms of contingencies, do you think that I would have been, as a trainer, I would tell them, if you see something, don't talk about it? I don't think I'd get very far with them, frankly, if I said that. I think that they would not respect me at all if I said that. I think that they would expect me to expect them to use their judgment, that whatever they saw, they may not want to make an air-to-ground call on it. They may think the best thing to do is to just record it and bring it back. But I think that we would allow them to make that judgment for themselves.
Well, we'll soon see. I know I have, as we got about 3 minutes here, I have talked to one astronaut who is, in his words, hopefully slated to be one of the first rockets going to Mars. And what he told me was, you know, they have to land on the moon, and then NASA will have to build, as funny as this sounds, a gas station that floats between the moon and Mars in order to refuel the rocket in order to get there. Now, they could use some kind of fusion, and I forget what he called it, but it would jettison the rocket right past Mars.
I mean, Dave, this is the turn and burn attitude that I actually try to slow down. It's like, okay, look, we've got one-third the size of the Earth, only 240,000 miles away. We need to develop that. We need to live on that. We need to use its resources. Mars will wait for another day. I think it would be a big mistake for us to go to Mars using chemical rockets. I don't see how it would help us at all to send astronauts out there on a 8 to 10 month one-way trip out there, and then they do boot prints on Mars and then come back. I think then we've got the Apollo program all over again, flags and footprints. I think we need to wait till we develop advanced propulsion systems, and that's one of the things I really strongly have recommended to Marshall Space Flight Center here, who developed the Saturn V and now the SLS, that they should now put that aside and get going on advanced propulsion so that we don't have to do these crazy things like a gas station on the way and so on. We do use nuclear propulsion or fusion propulsion, whatever it is, in order so we can zip right on out there and get this thing done. So I'm not one that believes that we should use resources for chemical rockets to take astronauts to the moon. The robots are doing just fine. Let's develop, or Mars. Let's develop the moon, and then at that same time, and I do think there's a lot to see on Mars. I am very intrigued by it. As you know, I really have been involved with paleontology for the last 20-some years. I go out in Montana every year and hunt the wily dinosaurs out there. And what I'm seeing on Mars looks an awful lot like the Badlands of Montana, where I look for dinosaurs. Not that I expect to find dinosaur bones on Mars, don't get me wrong, but clearly there has been flowing water, lots of flowing water on Mars. So the possibilities of at least life at one time is, to my mind, is very, very high, and it's worth looking at. And yes, robots don't do that great a job of looking for signs of life. That's going to take astronauts.
Homer Hickam, award-winning author, best-selling author. The story behind October Sky, the Hollywood movie. We will return to talk more NASA, space, Mars, the moon, the Van Allen belt, and more on Spaced Out Radio, hour number 2 next. that was a fun half hour. Very fun.
Well, thank you. It was fun. I do love talking about that. I really do. And
I know
am
you
intrigued
do.
by looking at Mars. I do see a lot of the same geology that I see out in Montana.
I'm going to run quickly, check on my boy again. I'll be back. He wasn't sleeping the last time, so I will be right back. I'm going to put you back in the green room. And sorry, guys, I'll be right back here. Sorry about that, Homer. All right. My little guy has a day off tomorrow, so he's all pumped that he's going over to his buddy's house for the day.
Great. So then he has a 4-hour drive, did you say?
Yeah, on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, that should be fun. You put on XM radio and
Just cruise away.
cruise on down the
Cruise on
road.
down.
Yeah, I get that.
All right. Let's see here. Thank you,
Hey.
Simon, W. Decker, and Vaughn for the super chats tonight. Yes, Homer.
No, I was going to say, do you want to hear about the supernatural experience that I had in August?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. All right.
All right. Well, let me know when you want to hear it. I will tell it.
All right, here we go.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Ubicity. Ubicity is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight with former NASA engineer, the man behind the movie October Sky, Homer Hickam, is with us. You can find any of his books at any major bookstore or online. Homer, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me.
Now,
It's always a lot of fun.
You may not believe that NASA knows about aliens, but you've had some weird stuff happen to yourself here recently.
Yes. Yes, I wanted to relate this story to you, Dave, and your audience. I'm one of these guys that kind of thinks they're invulnerable. And I've watched the COVID pandemic get a lot of my friends and family and so on, but I so far had avoided it. Last summer, however, I went out. I was talking about going out to Montana. I go out every year. I've done this for 20-some years and hunt dinosaurs. I do that through Montana State, the Museum of the Rockies, University of Washington, and we've had a great success. But that's not the point of my story. Montana was kind of COVID central when I went out there, and we go through Bozeman, and they were having a pretty bad epidemic of COVID, but somehow I got through Montana, I got on out to the Badlands, and got back to Huntsville, and no COVID. It's all good. So then I go up to West Virginia, which is the second COVID central that I went to, and there they were doing Rocket Boys the musical. The Theater West Virginia does the Rocket Boys the musical every year, and so I went up there to support that, and about half the cast was down with COVID. So they will, they want to meet me. They want to shake my hand. They want to hug me. The girls want to kiss me, all this kind of thing. And it's like, okay, they've taken off their mask and everything to make this happen. I turned to my publicist, Burke Allen, and I said, Burke, this is going to be a real test to see whether I can catch COVID. Well, guess what? I got COVID. I got it really, really bad when I got back home in about 5 days. Bam! I had this awful thing, and I had scarlet fever when I was a kid, and so my throat is very sensitive, And
Meet Extended Stay America Select Suites, a new place like home with spacious apartment-style suites and full kitchens. With Extended Stay America Select Suites, you get real, simple value. The longer you stay, the more you save. Learn more at ESA.com.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino online.
I was only playing for fun, so winning was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's favorite free online social casino. You too could have the chance to win life-changing cash prizes. Absolutely anybody could be like Mary. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and play for free now. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of the winner.
if there's probably little bacteria lives in there all the time. But as soon as my immunity kind of goes down, I get attacked in the throat. So I got attacked in the throat. So my throat is so sore that I can't and of course I get COVID on Friday. I can't get to a doctor till Monday. Everybody's closed up. So we're just going to have to suffer through the weekend, Linda. That's it. I'm going to have to suffer through the weekend. So I couldn't drink. I couldn't eat because of this awful sore throat. It was so totally swollen. I couldn't do anything. So in the middle of the night on Sunday night, it's like I'm dying here. I'm lying in bed and it's like, I've got to get something. I've got to get some fluids. I'm totally dehydrated. So I got up and went into the kitchen in the dark, and I was going to make some chai tea, and I opened up the cabinet, and I reached in there at random, and I took out a cup, and I passed out. And I woke up on the floor, and Linda's going, oh my God, and it's like, oh, I'm okay, and so I didn't get my cup of chai. I basically crawled back to bed. I laid my head down, and something crossed my eyes. It was the deepest, darkest, and I've been in coal mines with the lights out. This was the deepest, darkest black that ever crossed in front of my eyes. And I heard, without hearing, "You have nothing to fear." And believe me, if I had died at that moment, I would have died happy. I felt at total peace with the universe at that moment. I had something reached out and touched me. And so I like to witness that to people. I don't know. I'm not going to say it's God. I don't know what it was, but something. I connected with the universe at that moment. And I've told this story over at space camp. They all look at me like, oh, Homer's finally gone over the deep end. But I like to witness that. Now, so what cup did I break? I broke the cup that Elon Musk gave to me. And I love that cup. It had the SpaceX logo on it and everything. And Elon himself had handed me and given me that cup when I was out in Hawthorne, California. And that just broke my heart. So I put it out on Twitter and I put out on Facebook, that I didn't put out the "you have nothing to fear," but I did put out that I had broken Elon's cup. And so 5 days later, I received this huge box loaded with SpaceX swag and hundreds of signatures on a card from SpaceX employees, including in there four huge SpaceX cups. So I think that I have been touched not only by the supernatural in a very, very positive way, but maybe by Mr. Musk and his SpaceX crew. So that's my story.
That is actually very cool. There is talk, and I know people who have talked to Elon Musk who have said that he has been read in about UFOs. He just is not allowed to say anything publicly.
Well, if anybody is, I would say Elon probably is. In the first place, Elon has become the SpaceX company. It's not the only one, by the way. Blue Origin's coming along. I don't want to slight any of the other aerospace companies, but SpaceX has become extremely important to the United States, not only to NASA, but the Department of Defense. You may notice that SpaceX, ULA, the United Launch Alliance, has been the principal provider of the rockets to carry Department of Defense satellites into orbit and beyond. But SpaceX is coming on strong because they're very reliable and not that expensive. So Department of Defense is using SpaceX an awful lot, and it's almost like Elon's given that to them. NASA was the one that provided money to Elon to develop the Falcon 9. The Department of Defense didn't do that. So all of a sudden, because of what NASA did and what Elon had and his people had the courage to do, they have created now a launcher that is the very inexpensive to use. So the Department of Defense is stepping up big time to use that. So if anybody's going to be read in on anything like that, that if anything is going to cause a problem with launching these satellites, I'd say Elon is probably the person that would know.
There's still quite an argument about the Van Allen belt and whether or not, there's still people who deny that we went to the moon in the first place or that we've sent astronauts past the Van Allen belt. Is the Van Allen belt still a continued worry or stress to get back to the moon?
Well, you wouldn't necessarily want to go up and hang out in it for a while, but no, for Apollo, they just zipped right through it. You're just within it for a few minutes as you zip on out to the moon. There's always, in space, there's always radiation, there's background radiation, and there's cosmic rays. So, there is a limit to how much time astronauts can spend just in low Earth orbit, for that matter, and that's below the Van Allen belt. So they actually have dosimeters that they wear that is measured how much radiation they're receiving, and quite often the female astronauts are counseled, if you want to have a family, you probably shouldn't fly again. So NASA does keep up with that, but I don't think the Van Allen belts per se are a problem. Now, radiation is a problem throughout space. It's a problem on the moon. If we're going to build outposts on the moon, most likely we're going to have to build them underground or in lava tubes, or we're going to have to pile the regolith on top of our modules. They just can't be out there in the open because there's dangerous radiation. There are storms on the sun that sends dangerous radiation that could kill astronauts on the moon. And of course, going on to Mars, again, that's why I don't like chemical rockets to go to Mars. You don't want to be out there for 8 to 10 months receiving all that radiation. It's not that it's going to kill you necessarily, but it's definitely going to up your percentage on the likelihood of getting cancer during your lifetime. But I'd also have to say that NASA has been working on a number of different alloys and engineering concepts that they can come up with to diminish the amount of radiation that these astronauts would receive on the way to Mars, if that's the way they end up deciding to do it. But again, I hope that they build nuclear rocket engines that will allow us to zip on out to Mars, with about like we zip on out to the moon, and then probably if you're going to live on Mars for any time, again, you're going to have to be in some sort of shelter. You can't just be walking around on Mars all the time because it's dangerous in terms of radiation and cosmic rays.
Question from Vaughn here up in Edmonton, Alberta. He is asking, why were the astronauts not fried in space by the radiation?
Well, again, they do have dosimeters and they do receive radiation, but we all receive radiation. Here on Earth, we receive radiation. I don't know if you know it or not, but coal is actually radioactive. So there's a very high incidence of people who live in coal towns like me who came down with colon cancer. My dad had colon cancer, my mother had colon cancer, all my uncles had colon cancer, and I had colon cancer. So background radiation is everywhere. It's not just out in space. So yeah, you do receive a little bit higher out there, but it's within tolerance.
Okay, so if the Van Allen belt isn't the issue that many amateur scientists or people of interest have in common, how do we land a rocket on the moon? Are we going to do it with the same type of rockets that could land themselves?
Well, it will definitely be automated compared to the LEM. And the LEM in the Apollo era were basically, you were flying by wire. Neil Armstrong had to turn the computer off and basically land the Apollo 11 LEM himself. So that's not going to be possible with this great big starship. You're way too high. It'll be like the Falcon 9 boosters land now. It's all going to be very, very automated. So computers are going to have to take over that chore. I fear. I don't really fear it. I think it's great that we do have now the computer systems that allow us to do that.
Okay, so in order to set up the moon, I mean, we're going to have to send hundreds of people up there. I mean, that's a lot of rockets. Are we going to be doing multiple rockets at once in order to get not only the materials up there to build, but in order to have the people there in order to create the infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, we will, but it's got to be worthwhile. To go do that for science and inspiration, I don't think we're going to be allowed to do that. Now, let me couch that also by talking about the South Pole Station, the National Science Foundation's South Pole Station. We have been expending billions of dollars building that base, C-130 flights, hundreds of them flying down there, carrying all this cargo and equipment, all these people down there. So we have done that. And we have done it basically just most people don't even know, aren't aware that we have this huge base on the South Pole. We have done that over the years. And why have we done that? Mostly it actually is for science. But for the moon, don't think we can quite get away for a number of reasons just doing it for science. It's just too visible and it's too controversial. So I think there has to be reason to do this. Now, right now, NASA with the Artemis program, they don't have much of a plan, in my opinion. They're going to go up there and land. They're going to walk around. They'll do some science, but there is no plan right now to build a base or a laboratory, and that's what I push for. That's why I say not only do you have to figure out how to go to the moon, but you have to figure out why. We're going to go up there. We're going to build something like the South Pole Station that we can sortie from. And then who's going to sortie from? Not necessarily NASA, but commercial companies will sortie from this. This is what I'm pushing for, that NASA will build this base down in the South Pole where we think that there's water, ice, and there's my supernatural friend, my science cat, joining in on here. But so we're going to go, we'll do that, but then commercial corporations, other countries can use the base that we build, and then they will sortie out and start looking and gathering in these resources, whether it's helium-3, whether it's rare earth materials, titanium, whatever it may be, thorium. The moon is loaded with thorium, and thorium reactors, that's a great reactor. And they're very powerful and very clean. So there's going to be all kinds of reasons to do it if NASA has the foresight, and not only NASA, but ESA and the Canadian Space Agency. All of these people who have signed the Artemis Accords have the foresight, not just to go up there and walk around and bring back moon rocks. We got plenty of moon rocks, but to actually build something there that will be a base from which anybody that wants to, but can get there, can sortie out and start exploring the moon and start using its resources and bringing back wealth to the Earth. Because that's the only way we're ever, in my opinion, ever going to have humanity in space, is that it starts bringing wealth back. Just like the reason that the Europeans settled the New World. It wasn't because they were doing it for, oh my goodness, let's explore and it'll be great. It's because they started bringing back wealth. And that's the way that we will go into, in my opinion, that's the reason why we need to go. And that's why NASA needs to figure out, to do that, we've got to build a base. So yes, it's going to take a lot of rockets, but it's with the promise, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, Europeans, Canadians, Americans, whoever is part of the Artemis program, it's with the promise we're spending all this money and doing all of this work, and also we're going to lose lives in the process of doing this. It's so that we can bring back resources to a very needy Earth.
How many lives do you think this is going to cost?
Well, I don't know, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to chuckle over that, but it's just like gosh, who knows? I mean, if we look what it took to settle the Americas, how many lives were lost there, and so I think the real question is what's acceptable. And so, if we had lost a crew on the moon during the Apollo era, that would have been totally, utterly unacceptable, and that's one of the reasons we stopped going, because they were afraid they were going to do that. But if we couched the Artemis program in such a way that we're doing this like it's a substitute for war, if you will. We're doing this great, grand thing in order that life on Earth is better. How many lives is worth it for us to do that? I think we will lose, just like coal miners. How many lives were lost digging up coal? It's because our civilization was desperate for it. It needed it. That's why we were willing to send men underground and watch a certain percentage of them die. It's because we needed for them to expend their lives for the betterment of civilization. So again, that's what our politicians have to do. That's what our astronauts have to do. That's what all of us in this space business have to do, is to talk about why we're going and what we're going to do and why it's so important. And again, science is important, inspiration is important, but ultimately what's really important is bringing wealth back to Earth.
We got about 3 minutes to go before we got to go to break at the bottom of the hour. Homer Hickam is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Is it necessary? Do we need, as humanity, to be doing this?
We could probably not do it, but we would regret it for a number of different reasons. One, we are very close to fusion reactors, and again, I come back to the fact that the moon is covered with helium-3, which probably is going to be a very good fuel for fusion. Let's say that we don't, and that we become insular like China did 1,000 years ago. They stopped going out. The Chinese did. They lived to regret it. They had, the Europeans and others come in and conquer their country because even the Japanese, because they simply stopped going out and stopped discovering, and so even though they were just leagues ahead of everybody else when they stopped. So I don't think that we dare stop, but I can see the scenario where we would, and I think as a planet, as a people, we would be very sorry for it.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. I mean, I understand humanity's curiosity. We love to explore. We love to be curious. We love to go places where we're not supposed to go. And I can understand wanting to go into space. I think all you have to do is look up at the beauty. If you get out of the cities now, you just have to look up at the beauty of the stars. I mean, where I live on a moonless night, there's hundreds of thousands of stars all over the sky, and if I'm real lucky, I get a beautiful view of the Milky Way as well. And it always piques my curiosity, that childhood curiosity of what else is up there, what else could be hiding up there that we just have no clue about. I mean, do you believe then, with a minute to go here, with all of this, the planets that have been discovered over the last decade, do you believe there is life out there in some of these Goldilocks zones that we hear of?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, mathematically, it has to be, right? And in the early 1990s, before the Hubble was launched, we had no idea how many actual galaxies there were. They're in the order of billions. So there's no question there's life. Whether there's life like ours or not, that's probably the real question. Is there life that would also want to be looking out and also be moving out like us? There's something that's just built into us. I mean, we look at this, we look at the planets, we look at our galaxy, we look at the Milky Way, and we see beauty. There's no reason why that's true, but it is. So since it is, we want to see more of it. If it was ugly, we wouldn't even look. So again, that gets a little bit philosophical.
Very true.
But I think that same black shade that crossed my eyes last August, we have nothing to fear.
Homer Hickam, award-winning author, best-selling author, former NASA engineer. We got him until the top of the hour here on Spaced Out Radio. We will return right after this. This has been a great show so far.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I'm glad that Wyatt, my Siamese cat, got a little bit of a view here. He wanted to come up and see who I was talking to, so he looked at you and
Perfect.
ran away for some reason. I don't know why, but
I wonder why. Thanks, man.
He's a cutie. We love our Wyatt.
So I know many of you have been asking. Here is a photo from today of my new grandson.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yep. That's my boy today, 1 day old.
Have you named him yet?
His name is Jasper. He was 6 pounds.
I like it.
6 pounds, 4 ounces. He was a couple weeks early, but he was very healthy. And he's got great lungs on him. And I kind of like him. I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, he's going to be a cool kid. I like his name, Jasper. That's almost Homer. Yeah, that is really, really cool. You know, when I worked for NASA, I was actually in a branch that had 80% women because the astronauts respond better to actually being trained by women. It's like the voices in the cockpit of aircraft. Mm-hmm. If you have an emergency, they use the women's voices for that. So 80% of the training people were women. A reason I bring that up is because when our women got pregnant and had to go on maternity leave, they wanted to stay out longer than the 30 days at that time they got for all leave. But you could ask somebody to give leave, and so I had tons of leave built up.
Meet Extended Stay America Select Suites, a new place like home with spacious apartment-style suites and full kitchens. With Extended Stay America Select Suites, you get real, simple value. The longer you stay, the more you save. Learn more at ESA.com.
It said we make 35,000 decisions a day. No wonder they don't all come out just right. Like when you pre-ordered those fresh sneakers that dropped right when you repaid your friend for lunch. It happens. But overdrafts don't have to. Get extra time to cover your overdraft with Citizens Peace of Mind, so you can relax in those sweet kicks and focus on your next 34,999 decisions. Learn more about how to reverse your overdraft fees at citizensbank.com/peace of mind. Citizens, made ready. Member FDIC.
And so I gave, I guess maybe 5 women. I said, you know what? I'll give you 30 days if you'll name, if your baby's a boy, if you name him Homer. I never got taken up on that. Not once. So it's not a bad name, but I like Jasper. Jasper's better.
Yeah, it's a badass name. It really is. I kind of like him. I cannot wait to meet him on the weekend. And
that's terrific.
Yeah, and the cutest thing happened this morning. My son was getting ready for school because up here it's, just a regular day. It's not Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving was in October. And so he's eating his cereal this morning, and he pauses and he stops and he's like, "Daddy," I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Would it be okay if I told my class today that I'm now an uncle?" And I went, and
wow.
I just smiled.
That's exciting.
I just smiled, and I was like, "Of course, dude. Of course you're allowed.
Of course, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. How old is he?
He's 9.
How old's your boy?
He's 9. We're
9.
a blended family. So
see that? See what's that logo right there? I'm pointing at.
Yeah.
He's about Give him another year. He needs to go to space camp.
I know.
All right.
I know. I think he would be great for that, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love it. It'd be great. I mean, everybody does once they're here. And there's a number of scholarships around. We have a Paco Hickam scholarship named after my cat Paco, the first cat to meow in space.
Nice.
And yeah.
Your
Paco
cat...
meowed to a lonely astronaut. And he was the first cat sounds ever to be heard in space was Paco.
How did you manage that?
Well, I write about that a little bit in Don't Blow Yourself Up. So we had an astronaut who was always on the outs with their crew. For some reason, they just didn't really click with them. And I liked her. She was a great lady, very, very sharp. And she would often come here and be here in my house, this very house that I'm in. And she loved cats. It was a black and white tuxedo cat, very demonstrative, very loving. And so while she was in orbit, the word I got back from the docs down at JSC was that she was a little bit space sick. And the reason that she was because she had agreed to do this experiment called autogenic feedback. She didn't take the seasick pills that most of them take to avoid this space adaptation syndrome. She was trying to use autogenic feedback to honor this principal investigator who had this experiment on board. And so it wasn't really working very well. None of us expected it to work, and she was sick. And so
I hate to cut the story right there, but we're on in like 3 seconds. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Past the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. For the final time tonight, best-selling author, former NASA engineer, Vietnam veteran Homer Hickam is with us tonight, and we are really enjoying the show, talking about everything to do with space. And Homer, I got a couple of questions from our audience that I would love to ask you if you don't mind.
No, great.
All right, let's get to it. Eddie is asking, Homer, is there any possibility that the moon may be hollow?
I don't think the moon is hollow. We actually have slammed a number of rockets into the moon, and